let's just put it on and then we'll get there. You know what I was just thinking? How are you? I was just thinking about this Howard Jones song, What Is Love? And, it doesn't surprise me. Like, I just had this insight about, Dirty Dog, about how he operates. And when I say dirty dog, I mean Satan, okay? Our enemy. He has gotten us all to be worshipful of romantic love, which is a very intense but short-lived experience. That, that in love, that swoony, he gets us hooked on that kind of love because it always dies. That part dies pretty soon. In fact, I think the research in this, I don't know, it's been so long since I've studied any of this crap, but I think the research in that was, the more relationships you've had, the shorter that time frame is. So by the time you go through that in-love thing, like, for the zillionth time, it doesn't really affect you very long, and it doesn't really, you can get over it faster. Because you recognize what it is now. It's a drug, pretty much. It's the love drug intended to make us mate. Like, God wired us with that potential so that we would fall deeply in love and we would make babies. And that kind of love can be brought back in. That's when the Lord says he makes, he turns the water into wine of your marriage. Right? That's beautiful. Okay, hold on. Yeah, I'll drink. Well, what are you doing, Sonny? So, that dirty dog has us worshiping this very short-lived, very painful, when it's sort of abruptly disconnected. I don't know how to say that. Abruptly, see, I sound like a robot when I'm saying, but I'm just a very intellectual, I'm just a scientist kind of person, I have a master's degree in science. So he has us hooked on this kind of love. And then you have people that are so burned by that, so hurt by it, especially very sensitive, big-hearted people that are so hurt by that they just sort of turn that off. Like, what is that anyway? Who cares about that? I don't want anything to do with that. I'm just going to avoid that at all costs. I understand that. I mean, that's the trauma response, basically. But here's the thing. If we can dismantle the idea of which kind of love really can energize us and set us free and that will never, ever go away, that's God's love. That's a different kind of love. And he said that we love because he first loved us. You have to accept his love before you can truly love people. Otherwise, you're loving with a little L. And that's great and all. That brotherly love can be beautiful, and romantic love can be, wow. I've been hooked on that my whole life. I've been a romantic love addict my whole life. Just lay down my life for other people, Not literally. I mean, when it really came down to it, I'd be, I'd be like, I don't know, I feel like I got a call in my life. I got to go. I mean, listen, if you're in a situation in which you have to shrink into a box and you can barely speak about who you are and you can barely be honest about who you are, you're in the wrong place. Thank you, Lord. Yeah, I don't really feel like I need to show myself to you all the time. I'm not really in the mood for that. I will at the end. I'll let you see me. You can just fast forward. You just don't even have to. Whatever. Some of you only want to see me, and that just needs to stop. I'm not here for you to gawk at me physically. Tear me apart, or whatever you do. Lord help me. Oh. So, I am sort of a scientific sort of person. I guess I could just talk to you a little bit about my testimony. I was born in 1969 in Washington, D.C. And I'll give you just the bullet points. When I was a little kid, I always talked to God. I just was like, hi, God. Just as a child, child doesn't know any better. And the thing I would do when I would be upset, I would do two things as a little teeny kid. If I would get mad or upset or sad, other than listen to my records, I would go down to this formal living room. This is so funny. And I would either open up this giant Bible and look at all the pictures of the people had done of heaven. And it's one of these, I think it might have been I don't know what it is. It's around somewhere. My mom got me one recently. I would either do that, or I would take my crayons and color on this little hidden part of a wall where I was like, I knew that they wouldn't let me to do that. It was like my passive aggressive way of fuck you, Sorry, Lord. But that's, as a kid, you don't necessarily use the F word, but you feel like that. That's the spirit of it. You're like, So this was the two little things I used to do. And I always talked to God if I was sad or, I remember I used to have a lot of, stomach problems. I was that's how the anxiety of the world would manifest in me. I'm such a sensitive little creature. I'd just get sick, and then I'd just have to go home. I'd be like, I can't, that was for years. When I was a little kid, I'd just get kind of sick. So I remember sitting in the bathroom as a little kid many times and being like, God, can you please help me with this? My stomach really hurts. And then, a second later, I would be, better. Over and over, he would show up for me in that way. And he would get me out of that condition, got me out of having to be around society. I'm sorry. This culture's been sick for a while. And it was pretty much a sexual revolution kind of decade in the 70s, where everybody was doing whatever the hell they wanted. And leaving their children in pretty scary predicaments. I think that's been a family tradition. Unfortunately. But God has been with us the whole time. He's been with me. And he's been helping me this whole time. Now, I didn't really know who Jesus was, other than seeing beautiful pictures in this Bible. And being very drawn to it just naturally. But then as I got older, I got into the conditioning of the school system, which is the Church of Humanism. That's what the school system is the Church of Humanism. So I got indoctrinated into the Church of Humanism. With the complimentary television shows that I watched and all the music, I was being programmed as a little kid to be very sexually liberated. Let me just stick to the highlights, because this is a long story. There's a lot of different stories I could tell. I'm just trying to stick with the faith subjects. At some point early on in my life, it was probably when I was about 4, I was sexually abused as a little baby. So that sort of set me off on a trajectory of being hypersexualized as a young person. Now that is a demonic thing. If you have been molested as a little kid, then we need deliverance from those demons. That kind of transgression leaves a mark in the spirit. Does it? Okay. And when you really start getting real about it, you feel like you're damaged. Like this is what's going on, you know? But you're not damaged. You were wounded. And Jesus can heal all that. He can put it back together just like he's put your soul fragments all back together. There's this invisible world, and we can't see it, but you can envision it if you try. If you just close your eyes and say, Lord, show me this. Show me what you will. Have the faith and the courage to ask him to show you. Anyway, so I would have a tummy ache. This continued. Tummy aches continued. I mean, I basically was hypochondriacal was kind of the way my symptoms would manifest, which would allow me freedom from these institutions. I mean, my illnesses have paid off. See? Because I don't fit in there. I'm damaged in that world. Now it's half and half. It's half and half. Beautiful and horrific. That's what this world is. It's all mixed in. The wheat and the chaff, all mixed in. All of it growing up together here. Anyway, so I'm in this Church of Humanism where I'm getting bullied. Because the norm is gossip. The norm is cruelty. The norm is cruelty. My spirit can't handle that. Meaning, like, I can pull those weapons up and use them. I've got it in me to be cruel. You know, the Lord's been training that out of me. But I also have it in me to stand up and say, why? Please stop talking about, you know, Jenny. Please stop talking about her like that. Why do you have to be so vicious? Why are you doing that? So anyway, and also I was, you know, pretty sexually liberated, had been sexually abused from very early on. I mean, you can guess. I had a very liberal attitude. I had role models that were not my mother. My mother's always been very, very conservative in that way. But my role models, the music I listened to, role models and that such and forth, were encouraging. I mean, you know, kind of a mindset of a man when it comes to sex. But then I learned, like, pretty quickly. Like, the first time I really got my heart broken, I realized how much it hurt. And then I was like, oh, God, I just really need to, you know. There's a little barking. Let me go shut that door. I just really need to be very careful with the way I treat people's hearts, because this really hurt. The first time that I experienced that kind of pain, I was like, I never want to do this to another person. And that's when I got more sexually conservative. That was probably like 19, maybe. I mean, I had a few years of breaking hearts. And I can tell you, there are a lot of pedophiles walking around who were very willing to take advantage of that little girl. Very willing to gawk at her and... Oh, gross. I'll go through outside now. I'll just go, just go out there. Excuse me. That sets a trajectory in your life, you know. And it's hard to be close to the Lord or God as I knew him as a little kid while you're, while you're promiscuous, while you're doing whatever the F you want. You know, I'd fall in love every week, you know. I have been filled with love my whole life. I mean, that's the saddest part. I know I've said this before, but the saddest part of one of the saddest parts of the childhood sexual abuse is that it really robs you of childhood. It truly robs you, because while other kids who've not been abused in that way are out kicking a ball around, you're practicing like your signature with someone else's last name. Like, you're in love with Jimmy or whatever. Like, Jimmy. There was a kid named Jimmy. And I was in love with him. And then there was another kid that lived up the street named Adam, and I was like, I was in love with him too. Now, this is a very, very young, like 7 years old, 6 years old. Gosh, the barking. Oh, I see the kids are home. Okay. So that robs you. It starts a biological process in your body very prematurely. And that has a zillion different effects. I think I might have had pubic hair by the time I was like, this is very personal, I'm sorry. Very young, 7 or 8. Hold on, let me shut the door. Are you guys doing okay? Okay, just checking on you. I was recording, so I'm going to shut the door. No, it's okay. Oh, could you shut the back door for me? Thank you very much. I forgot I had it open. I can hear the bird. Go on, pup. Why is it just... Look at the sand. There I am. How are you? I did dress up for you today, but I'm just not here to be gawked at or picked apart. Okay. Where were we? 19. I've decided I don't want to break people's hearts. I don't want to do that again. And in fact, I felt so bad about it. I remember contacting this kid that I know I broke his heart. And... I didn't contact him. I ran into him. That's right. I ran into this kid at the grocery store. And I was like, I just want to tell you, I'm really sorry. About the way that ended. I feel like I was cold. So... there's only so much you can do to make things right when you really hurt somebody, but... So, after that... I can't get into the details of every single life stage because there's too many. Let me just stick with the main points of faith. So, at this point, I'm not really thinking about God. In fact, if I'm thinking about anything, I'm aware that there is a spirit world, so I'm interested in things like astrology. So that sort of starts and I learned how to tell fortunes from my grandmother's fortune telling card. She had very specific cards that I'd never seen before or never seen since. And I haven't seen them in a long time, but she taught me how to do that, so I never charged money for it because I always felt like that was weird. I never wanted to cross those two things. Even then when I was doing these sort of what would be considered by the Bible as wicked things, We don't need to know the future. We need to trust God. It's better to soothe your anxiety about the future by sitting with God than it is to go and have your palm read. They might be able to tell you a few things, but they can tell you 5 true things and 1 false thing, and you'll believe the whole lot. It's wicked. And if you want to know about something, ask God. Now, He might not show you instantly, but this is about patience. So I probably was like starting my New Age stuff, even early on, probably early in my teenage years. I was doing fortune telling, stuff like that. And I was like the outcast. I was the outcast at school, but I was the one who cast myself out. I was like, fuck all you. No, I mean, there's certainly times where I would be left out of things, but I wasn't keen on hanging around these people. They were unkind. The norm was unkindness. And not just that, abuse. This is where humankind has sort of devolved to. Left to our own devices, poking around in the dark, we're just going to, we devolve down into that unkind, cruel, manipulative, disgusting. That's where all this, that's what that demonic influence is. If you talk about Jezebel, that's what that influence is. It's manipulative. And some of us are given a lot of spiritual gifts. So if we get Jezebel mixed in there, you're talking pretty serious power to influence other people. Anyway, thank you, Lord. So, trotting along, probably by my late 20s, I was like, what's a moon sign? What's a rising sign? I mean, I'm like getting more and more into that stuff. So that's, that's about as, I never really got deep into the occult. When I started to scratch the surface of that, if we move on up to my early 30s, between 30 and 33, 30 and, about 30 and 34, I was very much into the ideas of the occult. Like I read some books, and I wasn't practicing anything, but I was certainly becoming knowledgeable about it. Until I met this guy. I was doing a radio show. I somehow was set free. I was set free in the most beautiful way. It was just really weird. And I loved this job, too. I cried. Because it's the first job I had in Boston. I had a hard time there for a while, but I finally settled in with this job that I loved, and it paid really well for me. And then, and I got along really well with all these people, and they let me be me. It was like a whole bunch of counselors. So that's where I got my belongingness needs met. So I knew it is possible to have a group of people that you actually really love and look forward to being around. We had problems here and there, but we worked them out, right? So that was a nice change. Every working experience up to that point was just filled with this horrible atmosphere. It's an atmosphere that made me physically ill. Which now, looking back, thank God it did. To get me out of these places. I didn't even understand the spiritual part of the things that were going on there at all at that time. Anyway, now by the time I'm 30, I have now a master's degree in counseling psychology. And I've taught already. I know that I'm a gifted teacher by this point. Everybody was sort of wowed by my teaching, even though the very first day, I couldn't figure out how to turn the lights on in the classroom. And it was like really barely any windows. So it was like pitch dark in the middle of the day in there. I was like all dressed up, sweating like a pig. Oh, God. I was so embarrassed. It just makes me like feel all weird when I think about it. Okay. Anyway, I got through it. And on the first day, you're allowed to give them the syllabus, talk about the syllabus, and let them go. Okay, well, that was like 2 minutes. I was like, all right, bye. I could not wait to get out of there. And that was like the longest 2 minutes of my life. And I was like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not very good at this. And I just had something in me. I wasn't necessarily a prayerful person at that point. This is in my late 20s. But I knew I had to keep trying. I knew that I would be good at this. I knew I would be a good teacher. So I kept trying. And it turned out like I got the greatest evaluations, and they wanted to do tests on me to figure out. Because at first they turned me down, I think I've told this story many times, probably. At first they turned me down. They were like, no, it's too weird. And, but then the guy they offered it to was like turned it down. So then they came running back. And they were like, well, we don't understand why we didn't offer it to you in the first place. Like, it turns out you have a gift in this. So we didn't really understand. Why didn't we see that? I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question. Why don't people see me? I don't know. Maybe God's just hiding me. Anyway. Thank you, Lord, if that's the case. He's probably protecting me from myself and everyone else. I don't know. Thank you, Lord. Anyway, so I found out then that I could teach, but then I didn't have a PhD. And I really didn't think I wanted to go to all the trouble of doing that schooling again and racking up another huge debt again. It's like, no, I don't think I can do that. I'll just go find a job in psychology. So that's what I ended up doing. So by the time I got to Boston, I was working for this place where I had this belongingness needs. And then this big corporation came and gobbled up this family company. And then I cried, and I was like, I don't miss you guys. So I ended up, though, with like this huge amount of money every month. It was like a severance thing that was supposed to go on for 6 months or so. I was like, all right, now what am I going to do? Now what to do? I mean, that was like an exciting time for me because I literally was like, okay, well, now I could do anything. What am I going to do? I'm in Boston. The boyfriend I'd moved up there for, I broke up with because, I mean, we had problems. I'm sitting there like on my own. I don't really know that many people there. I have a computer, so then I start looking stuff up. And I find out that there's this free radio thing. So that's when I got involved in the radio station. And kind of the rest is history there. Now, what was happening on the underbelly of that was that I was having time to like have this routine of creation where I would like smoke pot and like listen to my records or whatever. I had this little station I set up where I would like have, it was like an altar really. I guess it was, that's what it was. It was an altar where this music station was, and I had this little stair that I would sit on this little pillow. It was like this cool little thing I set up. That was my spiritual area. And I did have a picture of Jesus there. Like I was at a place where I was much more interested in the construct of divinity, because I was starting to experience a lot of synchronicity and a lot of weirdness, and that was sort of opening me up to these. And I was like drawing these people into this free radio thing, which is very small. I'm just having so much fun with that. And kind of going down rabbit holes esoterically, trying to learn about some of that. Anyway, there was at one point, this one guy came to talk. I invited him to come down to the radio station. And he had a really creepy vibe. It was like a very, very dark vibe. And I was like, something's going on with that one. And it's hard to, I mean, Ken and I are on the same page there. Like, we're very intuitive people. But if you try to tell that to other people, they're like, yeah, well, what did he do? Well, what do you mean? Like, okay, well, just never mind. Anyway, so this guy came around and was like really strange. And he gave me this book that his mother had written. and it was all about esotericism, mysticism. And I read the foreword of it that was written by her. And it said something like, if you continue to go down the path of studying mysticism, then that usually leads people to either death or a mental hospital. It leads people in very bad directions. It was a lot more eloquent than that, but that was the gist of it. And that really made a mark on me. I was like, ew. It felt like God was trying to show me, because the rest of the book was pushing it. It was like the content of the book that the guy wanted me to read was not the part that I read. As soon as I read that part, I stopped reading it. I put it down. I was like, oh, fuck that book. It was as if she wrote the book and went mad writing the book. And then once she was publishing it, she had written this thing like, don't read this book. I mean, that's what happens. People find out the hard way that this spiritual stuff is real. And I'm such a sensitive person, like the kind of events that I've had to experience in the spirit like that, I'm frightened quickly with that stuff. Like, I know that these things are real. I know this is a power. There are powers around us that we've not even scratched the surface of yet. So, to make a zillion stories into one quick little bullet point, then Ken and I decided to get married, and we have our ceremony with, at the time I was really creative, so I was like creating my own flyers for these episodes we would do these things called Like Humans Do, from that song David Byrne. Anyway, so I was very creative at the time, so I had made these pictures for the wall. One of them was Muhammad, one of them was the Buddha, one of them was Jesus. I think it was mainly those three. I was making a point. And we also had the song Imagine playing at our wedding. I walked down the aisle to Here Comes the Sun. This was on a Wednesday night during a full moon. The moon was shining right through the skylight, and I lived in this little round, this womb shaped. It's the weirdest thing in the world. Anyway, that's where I was. Spiritual and very trigger happy with anyone pushing Jesus on me further than I was ready to accept him, because I had that Antichrist spirit. But my brother, I would talk to him every couple of days. I used to be a real phone person. I would love to talk to people on the phone for hours and hours, All the pictures of me as a teenager are me on the phone. It's so funny. Anyway, we would talk for hours, and and he would email me too, because I'd hang up on him after he tried to push Jesus on me, and then he would write me about it. I'd be like, no. I would really get furious, like enraged. Anyway, so we were pregnant at the time. Ken and I were going to have a baby. Lost the baby. And that sent me to my knees, really. That was the time where I realized what abortion was. I'm feeling like, at the time, I felt like this was justice for me. There's more stories within that, but I'll leave it there for now. And I thought, this is justice for, I deserved this, is what I felt. I deserved this. And I felt really publicly humiliated by it too, because I had propped myself up on this pedestal, kind of giving myself this crown because of the way people were treating me. Like, we were like superstars or whatever. It was a very strange time. And people showed up. I didn't even know who these people were. People showed up for the wedding. This was at my little house. They showed up for the wedding, and gosh, it was weird. Anyway, so I'm on my knees, and I'm like, Lord, God. I still didn't understand the Jesus part. But that's when I started repenting for the things I had done. Now, I had already started living in more of a Christ-like way. By the time people were sort of flocking to us and stuff, and before Ken and I were involved with each other, I was celibate. I wasn't dating people, you know. I had learned, and I didn't want people like hanging around and puppy dogging around. I didn't want to hurt people. And that's when, at the time, I was like, I'd just rather, how about we just, this is very adult, I'm sorry, how about we just try the vibrator and the porn for a while? Because, you know, porn on the internet is a brand new thing. Let's just do that. To me, that was a better substitute. And I didn't understand the spiritual part of that either. And still, I mean, you know, I thought it was a better alternative at the time. So, always sort of walking the narrow path in a way, with a little bit off, a little bit on. I feel like God has been guiding me along and protecting me. And I trusted him for things like, I trust that you won't let anybody steal this car, even though I can't lock it and I can't and I can't get the key out of it. Anybody could have just walked up and driven off with that car. For years. But I was always like okay with being kind of poor, because I never felt like how much money you had anything to do with who you were as a person. Because I've known a lot of people with money that I don't really think that highly of. So it doesn't say very much to me if you have money, or if you're in some fancy, powerful position. It doesn't tell me that you're like a good person, or like a decent person. Nobody's good, I guess. We've all fallen short, right? Anyway, so then we lose this baby. And then, so I'm trying to heal. At some point, I have sort of ruptured. I had so much energy coming through me that I just couldn't even handle it. And my 2 lower discs just ruptured. And this was before the wedding. And like Ken took care of me for a bit. And I thought, gosh, if I'm going to get married, like, this is the kind of person I want to be married to, because he was just so good to me. Just devoted. It was that kind of love, you know. We would just, anyway. So, I know I keep jumping around on the timeline. I feel like I've sort of forgotten things I have to fill in or whatever. So, now we've lost this baby. I'm trying to recover, but I'm getting drugs from where Ken worked at MIT. And they're giving me giant vats of these little, what were they called? They're like OxyContin, but they weren't time released. So I can't remember what that was called, but very serious. And it was pretty easy for me to develop a tolerance to that. And I was like, I gotta get out of here. I couldn't even take a walk because, you know, in Boston, it's icy there a lot. The whole thing was kind of stacked up against me there. And I was like, let's just get out of here. Let's start fresh somewhere. You know, I'd only lived there for a couple years. And Ken was from a different part of Massachusetts. So we were like, all right, whatever. We're adventurous. And it was so friggin' expensive to live there. Oh my God. So, and he was like at a point in his job where they wanted him to take on more responsibility, and it was not something he really wanted to do. So he was sort of like forced to make a decision there. So it all worked together where we're like, let's just go. And then we had lots of adventures. We had loads of adventures. In fact, what we did was we cashed out his what was that called? The 401k. And we just lived on that. And we had so much fun. We made lots of puppet videos. And I got in shape. And I worked down there a little bit. And but every day I took a walk and got back in shape so that we could try again. that was what was most important to me. I was trying again. So, I mean, losing that child was really a major, major blow. But it was also a major turning point for my faith. It really drove me to my knees. And that's what you need. You need your turning point. And it kind of happens whether you're ready or not. Like, we're sort of suddenly in these moments where we have something happen, Anyway, he was there for me then too, just like he was there for me as a little kid. So now when I'm in Orlando, we have a chance to, this is what I'm writing my cousin Michael all the time, Archangel Michael, who I had a huge crush on my whole life. Oh, he's so cute. Anyway, and so we would write. He's very, very, very smart too. So he would, I had a little pen pal thing going on with him. So I loved that. That was so fun. And I was getting into art projects and making videos. I remember we made a video and sent it to The Daily Show. And then they played some sort of clips that like sort of were parallel to the things we sent, which is really funny. We're like, look, they got it. We showed it to everybody. We're so proud of it, even though it was so goofy. Anyway, at the time, I was deepening my walk with Christ. Off of all substances. Finally kicked the cigarette. That was the hardest one. I mean, I thought it would be, but then once I read that book, The Easy Way to Quit Smoking, it actually wasn't that hard. I was like, oh, it's not that hard. I mean, once you change your mind about it, that's just not that hard. Read that book. Easy Way to Stop Smoking or Quit Smoking, one of the two. How much time has this been? Okay, well, 42 minutes. Let me stop there and we'll do a part 2. Right? Part 2 coming up. I know you wish I would just sit and talk. Well, love you.